Well, I've got a long strip of Reeves 175 paper here. When I do a square pastel, I save these long pieces, and I could fold this in half and I'd have almost another square. Or this one is longer. Here's another one that's almost a square. So I save these smaller pieces and use them for other things. But here I thought I would do a few things. You know, why the Reeves paper? You might wonder, why the Reeves paper? The Reeves paper is a printmaking paper, and it's spelled R-I-V-E-S. It is actually a French paper, and it is a rag paper, which means it is made out of rags. It is 100% cotton. As far as I know, that's what it is. It's rag content. So I like it because it tends to lay flat. Now you can see I have tape around here. This green tape is frog tape. I pulled it off of something else that I have. It's expensive tape, but I like it, and it can be used again. So, and then I just have regular masking tape here. I'm gonna paint this one with this magenta and let that dry. There we go. So I'm gonna let that dry. Then I will put my Liquitex clear gesso on top of it. And I like the Liquitex clear gesso. It has grit in it, and it creates a nice sanded surface. So when it dries, I'm going to put the Liquitex clear gesso on top of it. Now the other thing I can do is I can take my Liquitex clear gesso and I can tint it. Here we go. I think I'll tint this with this Viridian. So I'll pour that in there, and I'm gonna mix it up. Okay, so I got a different brush. I've mixed it up. So now I have green gesso. I wouldn't use regular acrylics. I would use ink and fluid acrylics, because the regular acrylics in the tube are too thick, they're too plastic, and I just want to tint this. Oh, I have quite a bit of it here. So in this way, I can make my own textured paper, and I can tint this. I could also put this on canvas. I hate to waste anything, so I'm going to put some of that green gesso that I just made on this canvas. This already has gesso on it, but sometimes starting on a colored ground like this, you know, I wasn't planning on doing this, but we'll see what happens here. Actually, a bigger brush would be better. This is my regular paint brush, but so I'm just going to use the rest of this clear gesso with the green in it. Use about as much of it as I can. You can tint that clear gesso. You could put this on plain paper, you could put it on plain canvas that's doesn't have any white gesso on it. but this is just one of these inexpensive canvases that I had sitting over in the corner. And so now I have tinted it with Viridian and clear gesso. So I'll set that off to the side. Now with this one, I have another one. So here I have this, it's drying. And here I have this. I've got some golden pastel ground. I have not used this for a while. This is a little different than the Liquitex clear gesso. It looks gray, but it doesn't go on gray. Now I know that this pastel ground has to be diluted a little bit. So I'll put some on the plate. It's very thick, if you can see just how thick that is. Much thicker than this Liquitex clear gesso. This is something you can also use, but I'm gonna probably put a little bit back because I don't need this much. And I think I'll take this and put this in here and then throw that away. This does need to be diluted. I don't want any stuck on the lid there because then it makes it too hard to get the lid off in the future. But on the back, it says 100% acrylic off-white translucent toothy surface for pastel, charcoal, graphite, and other media. Also useful as an absorbent ground for painting, thin with water for a more uniform layer. I think it's best not to put it on full strength. So let me just take this. You know, even my little silicone shaper here pulled out some water. And maybe I'll just put it on with this. I mean, you can put, you know, of course this is a really small space here. But if you use it full strength, it's gonna be pretty gritty. So there, I've got some on this paper. I really need to smooth that out so there aren't all those ridges there. I'll use this one. Actually, most of the time I use a brush, but I'll use this. You could put it on with roller, but there. And it's been a while since I've used it, so I'm gonna dry these with my hair dryer next. I think the other thing I'm going to do, because I still have some of this golden ground here on my plate, and I don't want to waste it. I'm going to put some of it on the top over this. And then I'm going to put the clear gesso on the bottom just to see the difference. So these are just experimental little pieces of paper. And anytime I want to learn something about a new material, I get out something like that. I'm just going to put a little bit here. There is the Liquitex clear gesso that I just squirted on there. And I'm going to just kind of move this around. You know, one of the reasons that I like the Liquitex Clear Gesso is I don't have to dilute it. It can come right out of the box, right out of the bottle, I mean. All right, so there we go. I've got the golden pastel ground on the top, the Liquitex Clear Gesso on the bottom of the same paper. So I'm going to, next I'm going to dry that. Well, I have a few pastels up here with me. I took them home and I need to bring them back, but I'm going to make some marks on these papers just to see the difference. Now this one particularly, because I've got it really divided. I have the pastel ground on the top, and I've got the Liquitex Clear Gesso on the bottom. And as I feel it, actually, the Liquitex Clear Gesso feels a little rougher than the golden ground for pastel. Yes, the roughness. There's more roughness, more grit, in my opinion. This may be a finer pumice ground, a pumice. So let me just put some pastels down. Now, one of the things about both of these is technically they really need to dry 24 hours before you use them, especially if you want to get them wet or if you want to add like rubbing alcohol onto them. They really need to dry. But I just want to see what the difference is between the two products. So here is the golden, which really picked up the brush strokes that I put down, you know, and it actually, you know, you have to experiment with how much does it need to be diluted. You do not want to dilute it too much or you won't have any grit. But I can see that the brush strokes of my applying it onto this area of the paper, I can see those brush strokes. Let me put some down here. Now there's not a whole lot of difference, but I do think just by feeling that the Liquitex is grittier. All right, I'm going to try this. This is a pretty thick application of the Liquitex Clear Gesso, and I added the fluid acrylic to it. You could add all sorts of things to it, but this way you can make a colored gesso. So let me put the yellow down here also. But what a great effect to have that green showing through the yellow. That's a really nice effect. Now you can also put both of these products on canvas or a board. Now it would give you a grittier surface for your paint if you were painting. You could also put some drawing media on a canvas or a board, but you have to preserve it with some kind of a glaze or a varnish. Now this is just the golden ground for pastel. So I think I'll put this color. Okay, so, you know, basically they're both very similar. I like the Liquitex Clear Gesso because it doesn't need to be thinned. Because sometimes it is like, well, how much, you know, how much should you thin it? Really, you can use the Liquitex Clear Gesso right out of the bottle without thinning it, but you can't do that with this. If you apply it full force, it's just going to eat up your pastels. So, but they both create a wonderful texture. And you know, I put this one on, instead of a brush, I put it on with this. Well, that made an unusual texture. I might experiment with putting the clear gesso down with other things instead of just a brush all the time. So anyway, I just wanted to talk about that. You know, if people don't want to mess with making their own surface, then you can purchase already textured panels, papers. There's so many different kinds now, but I kind of like making my own. So I like the different, I really do like texture a lot. So that's why I do it. And I like an inconsistent texture instead of the same texture all over everything. So I just wanted to talk about that, show this a little bit, and tell you a little bit about the Pastel Ground by Golden, which is great. Just got this new jar, so I think I'll be using it quite a bit. And this is my standard product that I use on paper, the Liquitex Clear Gesso, and I also use it on natural canvas. And one more thing I will say is, you know, anytime you get a new product or a new thing and you haven't used it before and you're not really sure what it will do, take small pieces of paper, do little experiments like this. Could be your pastels that you have ordered, or it could be mark making materials, or other kinds of paint. You know, if you wanted to experiment with paint, acrylic paints, you could paint the paper first with some clear gesso or even white gesso, and then experiment and do some little paint experiments on paper. So something I've always done, and it's also a good way when you feel stuck or you're not really sure what you want to work on, is to do things like this, do these little experiments, because sometimes you discover things and it helps kind of give you some new ideas about things that you might like to try. So that would be my advice. And this green tape is great, but it's expensive, so I keep using it over and over again. It makes a really clean line. It pulls off really easily. I mostly use it to put on the sides of my canvases so that the canvases stay clean.